All right.
Good.
All right. Okay, we're set. All right, welcome everyone to the February 28th meeting of the Rush Planning Board. Valerie, would you do the roll call?
Member Ost,
Here.
member Corbin,
Here.
member Morelli.
Here.
Member Moise,
Here.
Chairman Strack.
Here. So we have more than a quorum. We have the full board. Only one announcement, and that is that Valerie has accepted a new job, but it's not as bad as it sounds because her new job will be full-time with the clerk's office as the deputy clerk. So on the bright side, she will be here to train her replacement, something she never got when she joined us. And she will also be nearby to help back up the part-time replacement that will be filling in for her. And that's just a matter of going through the hiring process, right, Gene? So however long that takes and however long the training takes. And we're just hopeful that Valerie will continue to serve us until that time. So you're probably doing two jobs now, right? Like usual. Okay, we'll go into the approval of minutes. The board members have a chance to read the minutes from the January 24th meeting. Yes, I did. Anybody have any changes? No. No. All set? I didn't either, so I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written. Do I have a second? I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. We'll do it too quickly that time. Okay, we don't have any public hearings tonight. We do have an important function with an informal review of 1025 Rush Henrietta Town Line Road. Let me see if I can turn my volume down completely here. I'm hearing a bit of an echo, or maybe it's coming from somewhere else. The what?
Himself on his computer
The microphone, yeah.
and just use the microphone, that's all.
Okay, that seems to have done it. The light's on. Okay. All right, Glenn, are you going to do the presentation? Okay. Okay, so would you introduce yourself and the other folks, and then
You like to come up here?
yeah, you're certainly welcome to come up. Well, this is fairly new, so we're still learning also.
The good old days.
These over, you can put it up so everybody has a plan here, but we're here for, I believe, different applications. One second. I know this is informal, and that would be for the change of use of the building at 1025. Right in Henrietta Town Line Road, which used to be occupied by IPSI, and Dave here is the owner of IPSI. These are guys with the skin in the game back here. John Saunders, who wants to move into the building, and Dave, I pronounce your last name, sure. I'm just gonna say it. And so Dave Shear, IPSI, who's moved out of the building.
Valerie, can you tell if if we're being recorded, or does Glenn need to move up to the microphone?
Over in there, we're recording the best.
Start over.
No, I wouldn't say so.
So we're being proposed that use of the existing building and site without modification. The only change, we're not disturbing any ground with this proposal, but John would like to move his landscape business in the town of Rush. It's currently located outside the town. Dave moved his business from the building, but stayed in the town of Rush, so we're just trying to make use of an unoccupied building. Landscaping business, it's a typical, commercial, service business. John would like to have some storage bins outside, the low height bins like you see for containing mulch material, maybe some stone too or something in there. John has a landscaping business. Any of the products stored on site would be for exclusive use of his business, load up in his truck to take out to job sites. The building will be used for office space. There'll be some training area in there, equipment maintenance, storage of materials, overnight parking of vehicles and equipment. Most everything can be brought into the building on the site plan. We have shown out front overnight parking of 2 trailers that are used in the business. Again, we're showing them out front of the parking lot because we're trying not to disturb any ground area. We thought this would be the easiest way to do it, the most convenient, the least constructive for the property. We are also showing a dumpster on the property that will be hidden behind the storage bins, which would be over on the south side of the paved area. Any additional would be a couple of signs for the business, one out front, a monument, small monument sign, the other one on the side of the building facing Rush Henrietta Town Line Road.
Okay, before we go on, in case folks aren't familiar with an informal review that this is, so it's a chance for the planning board to understand what the applicant is trying to accomplish and for the applicant to pursue what the planning board's view of the town code is and how it applies here. So it's non-binding. I will say that we will end up going through this in more detail than we normally would, because it's such a good case that I want to use it as a good training example for at least 2 of our new members. You'll get a pretty thorough review tonight, I believe, maybe more than you want.
No, that's good. We'd like to leave the meeting tonight with the support of the board, or not the support of the board, some direction is how we want to feedback or next.
Yeah, so the goal is to establish what should be done for 1 month from now, when there would be a formal public hearing for both the site plan to establish the capability of the business being there and special permit or possibly 2 for things that can only be done with a special permit or not. Okay, so I do have a few questions. Is anyone planning to live in that building? No, not you or anyone else. Okay. Because strangely, this building has a history that it's actually in the assessment rolls right now as a residential building. And how that happened way back in about 2018, nobody seems to understand, including the current assessor who was new. And I haven't heard from the building inspector, but I suspect he's new since then also. So you mentioned that the mulch or stone that might be located there is not for retail sale. Did I understand that correctly? It's just for the use of the business.
Right.
So you'd only be loading your own trailer, not anybody else's. Your landscaping business includes, you mentioned hardscape design and installing of pavers and patios and that sort of thing. Do you do lawn mowing and snow plowing in the winter?
We do.
Both of those.
Correct.
Okay.
Probably not mowing in the winter.
Not mowing in the winter. I understand. Mowing in the summer.
Minimal mowing with snow plowing.
Okay. As well as other landscaping maintenance, I presume, mulching, obviously, and yeah. Okay.
Oh, can I just follow up with that quickly?
Sure.
So would you store salt on site?
I'd like to if possible. If I couldn't, it's not, I can always pick the two. So
Okay.
That's not a major issue. It's
Salt.
Mulch and stone. It's, you know, you get a better price on it.
And now some insight to maybe how the assessment, staff would come out. So previously cost by the building. And from my understanding, that might be passed by the time. you got the negotiation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not good at hearing, so.
So previous cost by the week at 10.5. And the individual that owned it, we know what's that, of course, it was already passed by the water on this one, but it's
Okay.
my understanding that. But him and his wife either split up or one passed or something like that, that he actually was the man who did that building. Considered a pass.
Was that, okay, I can give you a little bit of experience from the beginning, because the person I believe who built the building and first used it was a guy named Lowell Simmons. And he had a sign facing Rush Henrietta Town Line Road that he called the place Lowell's Showroom Plus. I never understood what he was showing. But he essentially was a metal fabricator. So he was a welder, and like a lot of small volume welders, they try to get commercial jobs where they're producing repetitive things that they can do fairly cheaply and selling them to other manufacturers. So that part surely was industrial. He did some welding on the side at retail, including jobs for people like me. So that part may not have been, that part you could argue was commercial, but fundamentally it was an industrial business of metal fabrication.
My only point was towards the end of his life, he was actually living in the building. So maybe that's how it got classified.
Yeah.
as residential.
So I always suspected he may have lived there. He seemed to be a bachelor at the time I knew him. He ended up in poor health and moved in with a son who I believe inherited the building, Timothy, who you probably bought it from. And he ended up living in an in-law apartment in Mendon with his son. And sometime around that time is when apparently it moved from in some sort of industrial classification to residential. And sometime in there, it may have also been a body shop. Maybe that was something that Timothy was doing. I'm not sure. So, as I said, no one really understands, but I suspected that the original owner may have lived there, which would not have fit the code, but he was an individual. It was a very low impact business. Typically went by there, only ever saw his personal car. Very few customers showed up. Obviously, he must have had trucks loading on unloading at times and some other customers. But essentially, it was a very low impact business with a smaller than parking lot. And nothing outside. Okay, any other questions from the members?
I have a few. I have both the family residence and the body shop, both through, depending on whether you're going to the parcel viewer or the property.
In the real estate portal.
Yeah. I had three concerns. So you're looking for a permission to use this under a section 12015 limited industrial section AIH, permitted use retail and service type commercial business. I'm assuming that's what makes sense. There is a restriction that says no more than 5% of a limited industrial district may be used for this purpose, being retail and service type commercial business. It looks like this parcel, the entire parcel, not just the building, but the entire parcel is about 2.3%. So one of the questions I had, well, yeah, what about, they're talking about the district, 5% of the district. What else is in the district that might be considered retail or service type? And the only thing I could find was there's a Happy Smiles or something. There's a medical service place, number 15 on the East Henrietta side, Henrietta side. When I look in detail, trying to figure out just what the space is, it looks very close. It looks like in fact, that the 5% would allow both the service that you're talking about and the other. I went to all the rest of the buildings, none of them. There is a dance studio in one of the office buildings.
Is that right?
Yeah, in one of the office buildings, but it's just so small. Let me see if I can find this here. Just so small. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's not it.
And you often sit down if you don't understand there.
Oh, here we go.
This will be a while.
Okay, so if we look at, here's all, I went around and got the names of all these things. This, there's an office building here with a dance studio in it, but I mean, the dance studio is 15 feet wide by 20, it's not
In
very,
85, that's Sealand.
well, Sealand's on one side of it, on the other side
No kidding.
is a dance studio.
Construction workers.
Sure. And then this family.
But that's right.
Family Smiles is about 2 acres altogether, about twice the size of 1025, but it's, the law does not, the code does not specify when it says 5% of the limited industrial district could be this service. It doesn't talk about whether they're talking about the entire parcel. If you have something on that parcel, is it the entire parcel or is it just that building? You know, if we look at the building, it's okay. If we look at the entire parcel, it's borderline. But in both cases, it seems like it's pretty close. 5%, again, I estimated the size of the whole limited industrial. I'm not sure how accurate this was. This is my own little Visio scheme. Came out to about 43 acres. 5% of that is 2.15 acre. Your parcel over there, 1025, is a little over an acre. The other one's 15 High Tech Drive is about 2 acres. So I think we're okay on this 5%, but I think we also need a process, at least in the future,
Well,
to get more
okay.
specific. Yeah.
We could get into this later or do it now, but I actually this afternoon went through the real estate portal, got all the acreages of all of the lots. And by the way, this vacant lot,
Yes,
which doesn't have a number,
right.
has a sign. Well, there's a sign out front over here and it says that lot is 10.9 acres.
Oh,
So if you add them all up, it's 48.2 acres.
oh, okay.
Okay, but the owner of 1025 also owns 999, and guess what?
What?
That's commercial.
That's commercial?
So I guess I would ask the question to the board here, how do you define industrial? We define ourselves.
Okay, so there are definitions in the town code. So section 120, section 120-5, definitions and word usage. Commercial, the purchase, sale, or transaction involving the disposition of any article, substance, commodity, or service, the maintenance or conduct of offices, professions, or recreational or amusement enterprises conducted for profit, and the renting of rooms, business offices, and sales display rooms and premises. So essentially, it's sales to customers, as opposed to industrial being manufacturing. Here's industrial or industrial uses: storage, manufacture, preparation, assembly, processing, or repair of any article, substance, or commodity, and the conduct of any industrial trade, but not including such preparation, assembly, processing, or repair as is customarily done on site at retail, sales, or service establishments.
Obviously, if you need that definition.
You would be commercial, yeah.
The industrial and. We need both definitions. We need industrial 100%. We need about 50%.
Well, you do resale and wholesale trade, right?
Also,
Well, retail trade.
we don't really do any retail. We don't have sell. We don't have a showroom. We don't sell directly out of our building.
But you,
So service,
you do
You do service.
customer service.
customer service is part of it, right?
We do check every box.
Yeah.
The code also states that permitted use of engineering design of product. And I got to Dave, you're designing over there, aren't you? You're in. Big part of our business is industrial. And I think John will be designing landscape, hardscape designs as well, so. I don't know how much of the business is actually design, but I mean, it is a component.
In my view, if you're selling to retail customers, you're commercial. And of course, you design something to decide exactly what to sell them and recommend. So we can go into the code. That's here too, I think. So here's permitted uses in industrial, limited industrial zone. Scientific or engineering research and or experimental development of materials, methods, or products. B, engineering design of products. C, manufacture of electric, electronic, or optical instruments or devices. Scientific, laboratory, and process control instruments and devices. This is manufacture of electric, electronics, or optical instruments and devices, scientific, laboratory, process control instruments and devices, computers and data processing equipment. Separate category is D, light manufacturing, assembling, fabricating, or packaging of products produced from previously prepared materials, such as textiles, plastics, paper, leather, precious or semi-precious metals or stones, glass, ceramics, base metal, bar, sheet, and special shapes. E, testing and repairing of the products or types of products which may be manufactured in the district. F, support services for the facilities and employees of the district. There's really no definition for that, but typically it means utilities or business services like IT, HR, or accounting. G, offices for professional, executive, engineering, and administrative purposes. However, no more than 45% of the land area in a light industrial district may be used for such purposes. And then H is retail and service type commercial businesses. I think that's both of what you're talking about. However, no more than 5% of the land area in a limited industrial district may be used for such purposes. Okay, so to me, both of your businesses are retail and service type commercial businesses. And if the code was more allowing, not so stringent, is it what? So it says these types of businesses should only be 5%. There, it seems like the code, and I'm not arguing it's the way it should be or the way I want it to be, but the way the code is, it says no more than 5% should be retail and service type commercial businesses. Okay. Now, that 7.5 acre lot that IPSI is on now is about 17% of that land of that district.
But a couple of things. One is, it sounds like IPS has that service, what is it called, retail service? Service type is a portion of their business, right?
It is a portion of the business, and I would argue that it would be both. Retail to me is the most, walk in and purchase things off the shelf. Customers can come and go. Foot traffic, because of that. Every single job that we do is designed.
Okay. But it's not only retail, it's retail and service.
So we do propose service.
Right. So I guess my question, Scott, uh, or to the board here is, when we say, first of all, do we take into consideration the fact that this is a portion of their business? Second, do we take into consideration the entire lot size, the building? I mean, the portions of the property that are not in use at all, do they count toward the 5%?
To me, a lot is either used for commercial or the lot is used for limited industrial. It can't be both. Well, you could say part is both, but one or the other, but it's based on the lot, not on the building.
On the lot,
Because the law makes no sense if you're comparing a building size to a total land area, which is what it says, right? It says no more than 5% of the land
district.
area.
Oh, does it say it? Oh, it does say it.
Yeah.
That
Well,
one
this is
says
land, this is
area.
land area.
That one says land area too.
It says land area in a limited industrial district.
It doesn't say necessarily the lot. You know, I guess I was confused. I couldn't figure it out whether we're looking at just the buildings. And I was looking at the building in the parking lot is what is actually in use in that regard. I was looking more focusing on 1025.
So what John's bringing up, I think, is an interpretation question, right?
Right,
So in my mind, that falls right to the code enforcement officer, building inspector, to make an interpretation of the code in terms of that specific issue. This is, generally speaking, planning board's area, because the planning board is determining performance with this section, right, which is part of this section of the code, that the planning board makes that determination of performance. But if you have a specific question as to how to interpret a certain phrase or clause of this, then I think the board can refer this to the code enforcement officer, building inspector, to make that interpretation, give you that interpretation. That then you can use part of your review. I will also reiterate again, I know Scott talked about earlier, right? This is an informal review, so I don't expect, do I want the board to make the determination tonight as to whether or not 5% is a problem or not a problem, right? The idea tonight is we highlighted there's concern related to that 5%. We even have an application for the next month. So this is a good opportunity for the board to give their thoughts, for us to consider it
right.
and get the advice of the code enforcement officer if the board so chooses. For the next meeting, and then at the next meeting.
So it's a good reason to have an informal review like this.
Yep,
Right.
very
Absolutely.
good, very good.
By the way, we do this.
Yes.
Well, question that I have is if you have a building that has two, maybe three tenants, two of them are industrial, one is commercial, how do you define the, how do you interpret it that way?
Right,
So I think that we need to have some
figure that out.
clarification on that.
It typically doesn't come up often. You mentioned there's a
Right.
dance studio in the one, which is very strange, but yeah, okay. You do need that. I mean, you could arbitrarily say you ratio the lot by the amount of floor space in the building, I suppose.
Right, I don't know, I mean, and my thought, Scott, was. I mean, this. We have you know, we have a lot of information on all this stuff. If we had not, you know, if some of these things were very old, I'm sorry about that. How would we go back and how would we figure it out? I mean, just the level of effort, like what you did and what I did.
Mhm.
It took quite a bit of time to figure it out. And like you said, we don't
Yeah,
have.
and we don't know if these uses are actually accurate.
Right, yeah. It's a body shop and.
Excuse me?
Or permitted.
In the first place.
Yeah, right, right. Okay,
So I had a couple of other.
no, I've got lots, but
Okay,
could we just follow the outline that I sent out? We'll go through kind of stepwise.
Sure.
We'll probably hit everything. So we covered the original use. We covered the parcel area, parking and outside storage of the original use and Monroe County's real portal information. Lot and bulk requirements in an LI district. Everybody have their sheet?
Yep.
Okay, so minimum lot size and dimensions in code section 12017. Minimum lot size in a limited industrial district is 1 acre, and this meets the 1 acre just barely, but the point is it is at the minimum lot size. Minimum size of buildings in 120-16. Glenn, can you verify what is the size of the building?
2,400 square feet.
Is it 40 by 60?
Yeah.
And is that gross? That's outside dimensions? So it's 2,400 square feet.
The minimum is 2,500 square feet. It's close.
So, this gets to be nitpicking, but it is 100 feet, which is a couple of percent below the minimum size. I wouldn't see that as an issue if it doesn't already have a variance from when it was first built. It can simply enough get an area variance, I would think.
There is a secondary structure on that.
The accessory structure.
10 foot by 12 foot. It's actually.
Yeah, in our terms, that's known as an accessory building. And I don't know, for example, if that counts, but I was thinking the same thing, to be honest with you. Is that an interpretation we need from the building inspector as well?
Yeah, so the zoning board, as you know, is, I think, nothing goes in front of the zoning board unless there's determination made by the code enforcement officer, building inspector to say that this won't meet code. The other thing that comes to mind is, this application isn't changing the building, right? So,
Right.
Whether that's even something that's within the board's review. As an application.
I know in the past, we've required variances for front setbacks of existing buildings, pre-existing non-conformance. And again, I recognize this is in the area of nitpicking, but I suppose we ought to
Well, no,
ask.
like I said, the idea
Yep.
of this is to sort of raise these issues.
Yep.
That way the applicant becomes aware of.
Okay.
What we're thinking about.
Now, minimum front setbacks, section 120-18A, including corner lot effects of also fronting a state or county road. So our code says a minimum setback specified above shall apply regardless of whether the highway is at the front, side, or rear of the structure. So on a corner lot, we've always handled that as you essentially have to have a front setback distance bordering the highway, which is 100 feet for high-tech drive, but it's 140 feet from Rush Henry to Town Line Road. Right?
And we
If
have
you-
150.
If you look at the map, at least with my ruler measurement, it looks like the building does meet the 140 feet. And that's probably why the building is where it is.
Right.
But Glenn, that ought to be shown on the map. That the setback in that direction along Rush Henry to Town Line Road really is 140 feet. Which is a big setback. But it does conform, I believe.
So I didn't think. Before we started. Space. Vision. As we examine the codes, we realized that we couldn't go any direction. Without violating.
Yeah. No, don't you have room in the back?
So that building is the only place by code that it could actually stay, and you couldn't add a foot on one side.
Okay, so I kind of thought you could go back only because our code states from the center line of the highway. And even if you go to the center line of the southbound lanes of 390, it still looked to me like it's way more than 140 feet, but I didn't have a good map to tell. But okay, so I think the current building is fine. I just wanted to make sure the map is correct. And unfortunately, going along with that, when you're on a state road like this is actually a county road, then that triggers the fact that the side setbacks have to be 70 feet rather than 50 feet. So that ought to be shown on the map as well. Got it, Glenn? Everybody agree with that?
Yep.
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 And believe me, again, we normally don't go through in this level of detail.
You're so lucky.
70-foot side setback, which lot line would that apply to? The north line?
Well, I would assume that, yeah, I would assume it applies to that slanty north
corner.
line as well as the south line.
South
Yes,
line?
yeah,
We go-
I think that's what the code says. I think it just, if you look at the code, it says when you're on a county, state or county road, that triggers the front setback of being 140 and the side setbacks of being 70. So it's a difficulty of that lot is it's the smallest possible lot in the district. Right at 1 acre, and then it's a corner lot on two roads.
Now, correct the map, where would the front setback be then from Rushman and the other top lines?
Center of Rush Henry and Town Line Road.
Which property line would we be applying it to this little short one here?
Well, from the building,
Yeah, in my view, you just draw a line parallel to the center line of Rush Henry to Town Line Road, 140 feet back, and that's the setback.
It probably won't show up then.
It's very, I believe it's very close to the building.
I'll look at it. I mean, one natural, once we apply the 7-foot side setback. We've already got the 100-foot front setback to high-tech drive. It may show up, if it does show up, it'll probably be a very, very short setback line.
It's virtually the edge of the building.
Yeah, it's pretty much the edge of the building. And then the 70 is right at the corner of the building.
Scott, I was a little confused because the property does not go right up to the street. There is this
Yep.
parcel.
Yep.
That goes along there and then cuts over and gets
Well,
wider.
again, so I'm not the building inspector or the CEO. But in my view, the purpose is to keep the building for appearance purposes back away from the road. So the building couldn't be closer. In other words, you couldn't have a little lot in there to reduce the setback. It doesn't make any sense.
Was the town on that little parcel?
I don't know if that's a part of 390 or
I've
what
seen
it
it
is.
before that at the town, or like it's this town road, high tech town road.
High Tech is a town road.
Yeah, so the town kind of will own these little strips next to town roads. And part of the thought process is what you're talking about. The other part of it is sometimes they make the road wider in the future. Give them that option to do that in the future. I ran into this.
Well, this
case recently. It caused a lot of confusion.
This is a hybrid because it is a straight lot line along Rush Henry Town Line Road for a short distance. And then it angles back probably to keep away from the wetlands. But again, my view, you've got to be 140 feet from Rush Henry Town Line Road, as well as 70 feet from the sideline. And both of them are about the same in terms of the building. They're both right on the building. Which again, is probably why the building is where it is.
I would assume that the angle of this property is due to 390 for maintaining the bridge
No,
overpass.
okay. I assumed it was part of that, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
All right. But we've got more. Driveway access and parking lot setback. So there is a very strange section in our code that is section 120-60. Maybe I should read it to you. I could find out where it is. Well, if all else fails, I'll pull out the code book, which is right in front of me.
Hang out of here, Scott. I mean, like easier.
Yeah.
As a condition to the issuance of a permit for any commercial use in a commercial district or any industrial use in an industrial or limited industrial district, the owner shall construct the mall at least 20 feet in width, measured at right angles to the highway, immediately adjacent to the highway on which the land abuts, along the entire frontage of the property. Such mall shall have a concrete curb or similar structure at least 1 foot high on each side of said mall. The owner shall plant such mall with grass or other plant for ground cover. A maximum of 25% of the frontage may be excluded from the mall for access drive.
Okay, so if you want to come up here and I'll show you what this means, but it's hard to understand, but what the code says is that if this is your lot and it fronts on Rush Center to Town Line Road, you essentially have to have a 20-foot strip along the road that is landscaped, grass or landscaping, right? Except for 25% maximum of the total distance of that length of your lot line. Okay, so 25% can be accessed to your parking area. That is, frankly, if I was rewriting the law, I would make it have to be a normal sized driveway. But the bottom line is, I think you've expanded the parking lot there and you no longer comply with that code. So there's two problems. One is the access area to the road is too big. You don't have 75% of landscaping. And the other thing is you paved too close to the road in the other part. It's got to be 20 feet wide. So in order to comply with that part of the code, and we're willing to ignore the curb issue, some of that driveway has to be taken away.
Can't remember if it was Doug or his predecessor. But everything we done, that we either hold permit for satisfied permit or brought code enforcement in. So this is what we're looking to do. There was nothing, not a shed, not a generator, nothing was done there. Not bringing it to town brush. We don't work. And when I called and said, hey, we need more access to the driveway. What do I need to do? Do I need to pull the permit? So are you going this close to the lot line? Not doing anything with that. So the exact drawing, exactly what we're going to do. It's not, the permit. You can see the history of that property since we've owned it for 2019 or whatever it was. We pulled the next permits. We don't do work out permits for us. So if that code is in place, I'm not disputing the code.
Yeah.
But that should have been brought to our attention and we should have been told, no, we're not doing that.
Agreed.
We brought it.
Yeah, so the way I see it, you've got about 72 feet paved to the road, and it can only be about 55 feet, again, plus or minus. And there's a spot where you paved up to 8 feet from the driveway, or from the road, which has to be taken back to 20 feet. So Robert, how do we handle that issue where apparently they have permits for driveways that don't match the code?
So again, I'm gonna back up again. This is an informal review, right? So we're 3 steps down the line here. But in my view of this, since we have an application for next month, you can, again, get the code enforcement officer's input as to what's occurred on the property in the past. And if it is something that like, they would like back on their plate, the building department, and as a condition of an approval, for instance, or to consider having the code enforcement officer, you exercise their discretion in enforcing this provision of the code. But again, I think that's far down the line. I would start by getting the code enforcement office involved, see what permissions have been granted previously, see how they are enforcing this provision of the code. And I think then the board might have a better idea of how we can consider this application, whether to consider approval with the condition about this particular aspect.
Yeah, that's something that could be remedied after approval if it ends up having to be.
That's also something that. I mean, the planning board wouldn't be able to say, oh, you got a permit from the building inspector, so it's okay. That would have to come from you or from the building. In other words, we wouldn't have the authority to change the law.
No,
So that if it was made sense that, okay, they did get permission to do it in the way that was done. And the town wants to accept that, the planning board would need something to say, let this go, this is covered. Or it's, I mean, I guess my thought is, you go to the town tells you to do something, you do something the way the town tells you, assuming that's what happened. Then later on, someone discovers, oh, that didn't meet the code. So seems some of the responsibilities on the town. Maybe all of the responsibilities on the town, but in any event, I don't think the planning board has the power to say,
waive it. No,
to waive it.
this is a code enforcement. In my mind, this is code enforcement provision to enforce. But that being said, I mean, the way it's worded, looking at it again, as a condition to the issuance of a permit, which is, that's not what the board's talking about, but as a condition to the issuance of a permit or any commercial use in a commercial district or any industrial use in an industrial district. So does that require a condition in a potential approval that the landscape mall section of the code
That's the way I would read it.
be
Because what we're approving here is a use.
All right.
And by the way, not opposed to code enforcement, current code enforcement, board says, hey. So, I'm not gonna fight them. That's not an issue, but honestly, we're here to see, more conditions, you guys want that, and we want. See what's gonna make that done.
Okay, so that's another, I think we need to ask the code enforcement officer or building inspector to say what was permitted in the past and is the were permits issued for the driveway expansion. That
So we were told that we did that.
we could what?
We were told we did that. So we've executed a lot of permits.
Okay.
Accessory generate. We were told. We had, I believe it was done. Walked through the property with us and said, this is what we're looking to do. We actually put a bunch of measurements. We said, no, okay, fine. So we can pursue. Anytime we were told we needed a permit, we all no acting on that, it's still on.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess I will check with Doug and see what he has to say. But as John mentioned, it's not something we could approve.
well, it'd be something maybe you may have to condition a potential approval on this.
Right.
But again, this is a formal session, and we're just trying to highlight issues here.
Well, better now,
It's better.
frankly, better now than
Right.
a month from now.
Yeah.
Okay, a similar question. There's a concrete pad there, right? It seems to be about the height of the driveway. What was there put there for?
So the initial thought of the concrete pad is trying to put the accessory structure,
The what structure?
the accessory structure, shed. So we poured the concrete pad, we had the permit in, the permit application in, and John had just taken over as code enforcement. So John came out and met with us and he said, you can put the thing on the pad, but it's gonna require a variance because you're too close to the lot. So what we decided to do at that point is we found a location with John that beats town code, that didn't require a variance. And we kept the pad there for future use for things like possibly putting a dumpster or storage bin or whatever. whatever the case may be. So that's what the pad was.
Okay. I think the accessory structure can't be in the front setback either. Which that would be. I don't know, I mean, is a concrete pad an accessory structure?
I don't think so. I think it would be considered part of the parking lot. In my mind. Yeah, just the base.
Okay, anybody have anything else along those lines of the bulk dimensions and driveways?
I have some stuff on parking.
Yep. Parking,
Yeah.
good, go ahead.
Here, under limited industrial E1, outside parking of vehicles and equipment requires special permit. And you are proposing outside parking of 2 trailers. Is that correct? One of the things that we have done in other situations, when there was going to be outside parking of vehicles, we've required some screening. And I don't know what we all feel about that. It's just that there's going to be 2 trailers parked outside. It needs a special permit. Is there anything additional we would ask with respect to screening?
With these trailers, they have equipment on it.
No.
If we just have
Just
empty,
sort of equipment inside, just we have that more.
Empty trailers.
Material.
okay. Not a bobcat or a small excavator type of thing.
No, I mean, no, I wouldn't even sit out there. This AV can't.
That's true. Okay, thanks.
So normally you'd be hauling these trailers around with trucks, right, or something pulling them, so. What would trigger you on hitching them and parking the trailers there? That would be every night?
Because the guys wouldn't take trailers home, they take their trucks home, they wouldn't take their trailers.
I see,
Sunset.
so you would be dropping the trailers every night?
So that was a question. Regarding,
That aspect of saying screen, how would you? You know, you'd have to have a setback to either put a fence up or something. You know what I mean, the way that parking lot says, how would you expect to screen it? So you get your road front. So how are you gonna screen that?
right, well, I noticed you had it in the,
Face of the building.
you had it in the 2 outmost parking spots closest to the road, I believe. I guess I would be concerned about that. About them being further back than that. And then fencing or tree, bushes or something of that sort. Along the edge. I'm just throwing
Yes,
this out.
well,
Well, it's all parking.
Yeah.
You parking lots of road, you would, unless you screen. You know, along parallel with it's on that road, so you kind of block it that way. You wouldn't be able to block it with the type of drive.
Well, if it were set back, then you'd have an area to plant in front of it. possibility.
I would say one thing, 'cause we actually considered that at one point, we occupied the building that's coming out the street, and consulting. A couple other businesses in that limited industrial area. There's really no precedent in that neighborhood. There are trucks and trailers parked in almost every lot. Present. So I don't know what the accomplishment would be to screen one property that's 15.
Well, I'm aware of that as well. I just, like I said, in other situations, we have required some sort of screening.
I would say this lot maybe is not totally unique, but is different in that all the parking is in the front setback. So you have no opportunity to park along the side or in the rear. It's all out front.
The other item I had to do with outside storage of material. The code is pretty straightforward on that. Says no outside storage of material is allowed. So, I don't know what to say about that. You're proposing 1,500 square feet of low concrete enclosed, right, thin blocks.
I think that is why we're making this special.
Well, it's not available under special purpose.
Yeah,
The planning board couldn't give a special permit for something that's prohibited.
I guess that's where I have ignorance, because I guess I don't understand the exact definition of the special permit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the board,
It-
kind of explain that.
It's a common misunderstanding. So there are things that are permitted directly in the town code, like a limited industrial building on a limited industrial lot with the proper setbacks. You don't need a variance, you don't need a special permit. All you need is the planning board to verify that it meets the conditions specified in the town code. There's another subset of things that are permitted with a special permit. And they're deemed to be a little bit more risky, something they want special consideration of, maybe consideration of not just what it is, but where it is on the lot, what screening might be useful to prevent it being as obvious, or other matters related to safety and access and visibility from other lots, all those types of things. So there's those things that are directly permitted and those things that require a special permit because they require special considerations. If it's not one of those two, it's not in the code and we can't grant it. And the code is very specific. It's not missing a statement. It says there shall be no outside storage. And it goes on to say what those things are. It says things like piles and racks and those sorts of things. Now, you can argue that other businesses in the area do have outside storage, but we are not in the conformance business. We are in the approval business. Okay. At least from a planning board standpoint. So as I see it, and other folks can weigh in, we just don't have any authority to approve outside storage. I'm not saying that's the way I want the law to be, but that's the way the code is.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My initial thought was, well, maybe it could be enclosed in the building, but then it's in front of it's in the parking lot, so that would be a problem.
And it's in the front setback.
It's in the front setback.
So is there any allowance for this actual particular parcel? To build something out of there?
Let's say it again, I'm not trouble here.
Is there any room in the code in regards to this particular parcel? To come up with a solution to possibly store material, contains material in the rear of the building, not visible.
Not in the code as it's written now. I would love to have the code be modified to have that capability. To let the planning board decide if we could put something along the side and be screened or behind the building. And may or may not be screened, but it doesn't say that now.
Didn't you say the distance from the highway or something was such that there could be something behind the building, or?
I thought there was.
Well, the way we were looking at the code when we were examining that was to put an addition on the actual. I never really examined the code as far as putting the accessory structure. Reason we didn't put the accessory structure that we had was because we needed easy access to it from the parking lots. That's why we came up with that solution, put it on the side. But there may be, if the town will able to make storage in the rear of it, maybe only one person.
Yeah, so you've got the issue of getting back there. You got the septic system on the south side, right, which, so I don't know if you can drive around the north side.
There is one driving.
There is.
Yeah, we've done it. It's just that we have done work.
So that's something you have to look into in terms of what possibilities
Yeah, but-
exist.
Yeah, I think I would just need to know, at least get the opinion of the board of, what might be allowed to do there, because I'm sure we can come up with a solution there.
Right.
It won't be a problem.
The
Yeah.
setback,
Well, the
Could you
code
store
says
it?
no outside storage.
Could you store it on 999 and build there's 10 acres there, right?
Yeah, but still
Could
can't,
you build something back there to put it?
well, it could be inside.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Build the 10 acres, they could build
Yeah.
a building and put it on 10-9 or 999.
It's definitely a possibility, but I was almost thinking more of an accessory structure type thing behind 1025.
Yeah, I don't know about there, but you got room to do it on 999.
We, planning board doesn't get involved in accessory structure. The code is very specific about that. So I think we'd need the building inspector to weigh in and what kind of accessory structure would be okay that could be used for storage. That's,
what's the setbacks on, the rear setback on?
well, where's the map?
Oh,
Yeah, that's,
I think it's 35 feet on the back.
Side and rear is 15, right?
15?
No, it's 35. 35 rear setback.
That's,
Oh, these are signs. I'm looking up signs. I'm sorry.
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 So it's 35. Then the
Yeah.
other question is where's 390 and where's 140 feet? But I thought 140 feet was in here somewhere. Didn't even hit the lot.
So that might be possible.
I think
I would debate that the center line of 390 is in the median.
to the median. Yeah, that'd be way over.
Right.
390 comes with its own setback, I think.
Mhm.
When your code is based on the center
I
line.
think there's a door down right here.
So that's the issue. Could you do something back here without interfering with the
Right, they
wetlands?
can just come over here, get it, and
Yeah.
do their business.
Yeah, it's just matter of, you know,
10 acres
septic
of land,
tank,
you can do a lot, right?
get the moving emergency generator. Just the possibilities.
Stop. This is the ones they're talking about, the big block. What's that look like?
Yeah, thanks. Like big Legos.
Do I see? Okay.
So that it still comes down to the question, is that an accessory structure? That the building inspector give a permit for, I suppose. Because if we call it outside storage, we can't approve it.
Yes, I think I'm going to have a conversation with John at some point this week, see if we can approve some sort of structure for that's a concept. See what his thoughts are, the definition of an accessory structure. And see if it's something that works with John business. That needs to know what it's for John.
The building itself is sheet metal siding, so I mean, it could be extension of that around the back, I guess.
This is a ridiculous situation to
Canopy.
that will definitely more.
Go ahead, Stan.
Okay. So what kind of truck would you be getting your mulch in, for example? Is this a 70-yard tractor trailer type?
So, you would be able to swing it, I
Well, that was my point, yeah.
still don't.
Okay, so you wouldn't be getting good values if you, I buy mulch in 70 yards, believe it or not, and I'm just a homeowner. But we have a lot of mulch. So if you want a good deal, you have to buy 70-yard tractor trailers. If you buy any less,
You as a homeowner?
yeah,
Me as a contractor, I get the same price, if I get 40, if I get 70,
okay,
so.
Okay.
yeah, I push a volume where I can get
Okay.
that price.
okay. All right. So, and you're not selling to customers, so you wouldn't have anybody else backing in there. So the only time you'd have anybody backing it off the street is your own trucks when you're putting on mulch or stone or whatever you're doing, right? And if it's around the back, you'd have some different method, right? Because you probably wouldn't be backing around the back. You'd have to have some technique where you drove around the back and then backed into your pile or positioned for whatever you needed to do. I mean, look to me like the parking space was sufficient, even if the half was taken up with the outside storage, which it can't be. Looked like you had sufficient parking spaces there for the number of employees you have and trailers and so on. We have a section of the town code that's devoted to that, but it looked like it would be okay. And if you've got if you can't put the storage there, as we're saying you can, it has to be around the back, and then you've got lots of parking spaces. The proposed sign, Glenn, when you figured out the sign location, what made you decide to put it there?
I couldn't find a requirement for all.
Okay, well, there is one, and the reason I ask is because you nailed it. We have what they call a site triangle. So if you go from the right of way, where the intersection of the right of way is for Henrietta Town Line Road and a high-tech drive, right? There's a point, that's the right of way. I'm not talking about center line, I'm talking about the right of way, the 33 feet and that's 30 feet, right? From the center line. That point, you have to go 75 feet down away from the county road and 50 feet away from the town road. And if you draw that site triangle, so they don't want anything blocking view within that site triangle, you just below it. I think you just made it.
Yeah, oh, that's what I had too.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about. Reading the setback.
We-
Setback requirement.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's 15 feet from the setback.
for the sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then in your town.
Yeah, there's a big table. There's a,
To be honest, I try to avoid getting involved in signs because it's so complicated. But you need a sign permit, right? So I don't know if it's the code enforcement officer, or the building inspector, but he would verify that all those things are
I think
met.
it's so near the bottom. there.
Freestanding sign, front line setback 15 feet. Yeah,
What page is it?
It's a table, I don't,
You have.
attachment.
So when you do like chapter one.
And I started
right,
from the
right,
beginning of
you have
the-
the attached.
The opening to the parking lot, you got 60 foot,
Very different. type of fund.
gives you the over to the side.
put it on the triangle.
The only question I had is there a 10-foot utility?
Yeah.
Are
that's
there any
how-
utility?
Except. Oh.
To the center here.
Yeah.
That's why.
Oh, from Rich,
Well,
okay,
is
I
it
was
height of
doing
the
it-
triangle?
I was doing it
What's that?
from
they wouldn't.
height.
Yeah, the sign is
This
shown right in the middle of the.
setback, they mean center line.
Oh, that triangle.
No, the triangle is from this point. The site triangle. So it's 50 feet here, 75 feet here.
Oh.
It's not from the center line. in this case.
That's what I did.
Yeah,
Really? Okay, so I did some, I did a completely, I went from the
Yeah.
parking lot, the driveway to the parking lot. Up to the side.
We all did it. different.
yeah, he has 5 feet in there, so it looks. You might have to be back further.
Oh, yeah, but it's 15 feet from the center line, from the setback, it says.
Well. No, the setback would be setback from the road. But it can't be the center line of the road. It has to be from the right of way.
Front line setback, what's that mean?
That means setback from the front line of the.
Of the property.
Well,
property
of
or
the
the
property,
septic? Okay,
from the front line of the property,
okay.
not the center line of the road. So again, so you need sign permits for both, and
Yeah.
if you're able to get the permit, then that means you met the code according to the people who are checking.
So you get a sense of how often we deal with limited
Yeah.
industrial. correct?
So the other one along those lines is lighting, and I know you show lighting, I think, on the front of the building and the south side. And I think we have a big, long section on lighting, which I try not to understand either, but generally you don't want lighting shining out on other properties. It's gotta be essentially shining down and masked from above. Okay, so. Anybody else have anything else? I would summarize it this way. It's a challenging lot. You're at the very minimum lot size. It's a corner lot where you have essentially front setbacks both along two roads. Front setbacks are restricting for certainly. Well, outside storage isn't allowed, but it's restricting for accessory structures, which gets into where your outside storage might have to end up. Front setback's not a good place for vehicle storage either, but if it's two trailers and we could figure out maybe some screening. I can't say that we wouldn't approve that. The biggest issue to me is this idea of 5% of the limited industrial zone being allowed to be commercial and what's considered commercial. So that's what we have to get the building inspector and code enforcement officer helping us with. I know how I would interpret it, and it's not in a way that's favorable to your position, your situation.
In other words, you have to have an industrial, you want the industrial. That's not public or.
I don't, but that's what the code says. Yeah,
So
I mean,
you're really limiting what business.
you got it. It's very limiting.
Basically, where you can't.
It's I would, if I wanted to criticize the current law, I would say it's looking to create a college campus type atmosphere in a limited industrial zone, right? Where it's open, there's not money things in front of the building. You don't have a lot of traffic. It's not commercial, limited industrial. So it tends to be office professional type stuff and light manufacturing. So that's the intent. And I'm not saying that's the way I would write the law, but.
One other thing I noticed, and I don't know what the proper phraseology is, but you mentioned vacant land, vacant parcel. But it's vacant, it's not vacant, there's a building there.
Unoccupied.
Unoccupied, yeah, because a lot of the other places that have no buildings are identified as vacant, and that's why I said, wait, no, that's not vacant, there's a building there.
Okay, is there anything else we can help you with right now?
Yes, got a couple questions. So as far as big concerns are obviously outside storage. And the 5%. And it would show that the light industrial area is already over 5%. And studio that's potentially data behind the SI. There's a daycare facility, all these different businesses there. You know, how does that get addressed? Because those businesses there, they didn't put special permits or give permission to be there. And there's no repercussion there. What's the repercussion for God opening up the shop? I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
That's a good question.
There's no, there's no conformance capability on this board. and you guys say, no, you can't do it, and do it anyway. What's the repercussion? I'm asking that.
Yeah. So it's probably Robert's better position to answer it, but it ultimately comes down to the code enforcement officer and how they react. I will say longer term, and Gene can verify this, we are actively working on getting a group together to address this type of issue in the town. Not how we kick people out who have businesses, but how do we make the code so that a lot more of what we have is conforming because it's reasonable and there's no reason to want to kick them out, right? So we got this dichotomy that, yes, we have a lot of non-conformances, but we don't want to address it by just clamping down on the code because we think the code ought to be revised. So in the short term, I can't say it's anything but ugly. Right? And I can't answer it better than that. So let's say, Robert, that we said that you can't put the building there, or you can't occupy that building because it exceeds the 5% rule. And we decline the application, and these folks have wasted their money. And they go ahead and move in. What happens?
Can they go out and start using business?
Yep.
And if they, up to the code enforcement office, / building department to enforce the code. Which they have. No one can force a code enforcement officer to enforce on another property. Obviously, most of the time it's complaint based. This is a practicality of it all. But generally speaking, it's just up to the code enforcement officer to be alerted to or determine that something is not in conformance with the code and then bring the code enforcement action to stop that from happening. Obviously, as the attorney, I'm going to advise you that you shouldn't do that.
Oh, no,
But
I'm just trying to roll through every scenario.
yeah, no,
We didn't hear with the rules and everything. That
right, no, and I understand the argument, and that was why I was. I think there's certainly the question is how to interpret this phrase, however, no more than 5% of the land or area in a limited industrial district being used for such purposes. Because that just has a lot of ambiguity associated. And as I said, as you sort of pointed out already, well, what about the business? Do the businesses that are operating retail and service type commercial businesses unlawfully and have not been enforced on? Do those count towards that 5%? It's for the code enforcement officers that or the building department, not of us. That's something we'll have to talk about.
And it's interesting because there's a number of questions there. One is, are we talking about the building? Or are we talking about the lot? Another is if a company is 2/3 limited industrial and 1/3 commercial, how does that play? How does that play in?
Yeah, I think Carl brought that up. Multiple tenants.
Yeah.
One is this and one is this. I mean, there's different ways to calculate it.
Right, like the what's it called? The one building that has a dance studio in it. Because 5% of that building space is a dance studio, if it's still there. I mean, it was not just written on the windows.
Right.
If it's still there, is it just that space? Is it the entire building or is it the entire lot?
Yeah, and obviously three massive different interpretations. So
Yeah, because you'll have somebody else that is an limited industrial in there, so how,
and I'd be curious too, there's been how this was drafted in terms of, obviously part of my job is to assist the law enforcement officer in interpretation. In terms of, has this always been written this way? Has it changed? And so how was it changed and what language was deleted or added? What's the intent of this section? I mean, it's not perfectly written.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess. From the setbacks at 1025, that could be great to probably that. And by the way, I realize I made a change that day, but it might have passed that building was built last week. So. But that being said, buildings, built in the eighties, you know. So that the question that comes on a larger scale, not this one, is does it make sense to do a code review before the area out of town? Does it still hold on to the existing businesses that are already existing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the town board has. From the, how it came to the. And I will, you know, we can tell you, I think great strides over the last year, for the town to improve the code. And I think Scott was referencing that efforts continue, so.
One by one, trying to develop and make it more friendly. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a lengthy process.
A lot of the efficiencies that have been identified through the current, I mean, there's been a lot of local laws adapted, changing the code through the years. Probably after that building was built, so maybe it's grandfathered in, maybe when we built it, that code. I'm guessing, I don't know, but it's time to change.
Well, I think,
So that would be applicable to what we're talking to the 5%. Use of the calculation based on the use of the property.
yeah,
But the setbacks or things like that, that's where you'd say, hey, that's always been the way. We haven't made it bigger, we haven't changed it.
and the only reason the inherent building doesn't meet the code is 2,400 versus 2,500 minimum. I think that's from a setback standpoint, everything's okay.
I'm just saying, but in that code, the current code says it has 25.
Right. Right. It maybe, or maybe they had a variance straight from the beginning.
So my last question for the board is, I haven't been able to give a clear definition for the town's definition of change of use. Change of use.
Change
You
it.
know, we put it in-
Change the use.
Change. We were told that we need to go through this process because nobody was going to do a change.
Use.
Can I get a definition on that from you guys?
I don't know that there is one in the code. I would look at it this way, that if somebody took over a building and maintained the same business, like somebody retired, died, and they sold out to a guy who ran the same business, that's not a change of use. But if somebody shut their business down and moved it out and then rented or sold that building to somebody else who did a business that's different, that's a change of use.
So is the specific code section you're referencing, you may not even necessarily know if someone's been telling you something, but if a specific use originally permitted within a limited industrial district is proposed to be changed to a separate, different and distinct use, application must be made to the planning board for a new determination of conformance, at which time the board may require that any and all phases of the operation, et cetera, et cetera.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
It's okay, if a specific use originally permitted within a limited industrial district is proposed to be changed to a separate, different, and distinct use, application must be made to the planning board for a new determination of conformance.
So I guess my question then is, you know, breaking that down further, I don't need to bigger. Is use, are we talking about commercial use? Are we talking about industrial use? Are we talking about retail use? Are we talking about just a different business? What, how are we type use?
So in that, and again, the only person who can actually answer that question is code enforcement officer, interpreter of town code. But I actually think the way this offhand, you're talking about use of the property, you can certainly make commercial use, industrial use. When I read that, it says the specific is changed to a different other specific. That to me is meaning more of a much specific, a more distinct and specific variation of the word use. You're talking about, let's say this was a garden retail business. Now you change it to a landscape business. They're both still commercial. You're just changing the specific use of the buildings. You know what I mean? Even though you might not be changing the use of the building, commercial, you're changing the specific use. Specific use of the building was X. Now it's Z. But again, might be semantics because it's not to me.
Sure, and then I was just looking for some guidance about how you guys.
Yeah, like I said, it's not, it's a little ambiguous for sure, but it's up to the code enforcement officer to determine it. And I think in any event, that's talking about the determination of performance in a site plan is C of this section, site plan review. All proposed uses or developments in a limited industrial district shall be subject to site plan review. So I think either way you're coming in for a site.
Sure, yeah, and no objection. Once we're informed that.
Right.
Since this is an informal, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Talking about the use of this and that 5% rule. Depending on the interpretation of the code by the code enforcement officer. Let's say that it falls, it creates 7% or something like that. Is this the type of thing that could be appealed at the zoning board?
Yes.
So this is where, so my answer to that is probably no. Not appeal to the zoning. Obviously, there's always a way to appeal the decision of the planning board. In Article 78 action, Supreme Court, all that jazz, but the way that this reads, Scott, you can jump in if you think I'm wrong, but this is, it says permitted uses. The following uses and their accessory uses are permitted after review by the planning board to determine conformance with the intents of this section. So the code is written in a way to put, and then the 5% listed under that. So the code is written in a way to give the planning board the decision of whether or not it is in conformance with 5%. If this section 5% was in a different section, I would be saying the code enforcement officer makes this decision. But and if the code enforcement officer makes a decision, then you go to ZBA. After you disagree, and that's generally speaking, right? If you disagree with the code enforcement officer, you go to the ZBA. But because this is putting the power with the planning board to determine conformance with that 5% rule, the zoning board of appeals doesn't review the planning board.
Okay.
That leads me to another question. In fact, so if the code enforcement officer decides that I agree with 5%, negative 5%, not lots, and you now fall under the 5%, not something.
No, the planning board still makes a determination that you're in conformance with that. So it's a good distinction. So if that section of law, 5% of the land area was crystal clear, we wouldn't have to get the code enforcement officer involved. The board would be making a decision on next meeting, this is whether or not I think the board. But the board is asking the code enforcement officer or the building inspector for clarification as to how to make that calculation.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we can get really nitty gritty now. If someone, you or someone else disagrees with code enforcement officer's ability, way to calculate that 5%, then that can be ridiculous. So you can get really nitty. But again, I think for purposes of an informal review, we've highlighted some issues. We're gonna have to go back, get some interpretation advice from the code enforcement officer, so the board can actually make a determination of performance at a future formal application.
Should the applicant
What?
discussion with the code enforcement officer? I mean, one of the largest users, retail, would be Dave's operation. Maybe he would have some input for the code enforcement officer to consider.
So I wasn't, so the board is subject to open meetings law, so they can't actually meet with the code enforcement office or to have this discussion. So when I say refer to the code enforcement officer, that means Scott, the planning board chair, can say, we don't know how to interpret this. Please tell us how to interpret this via email. Okay. And he will respond, tell the board, this is how I would interpret this division of the code. If the board wants, he could be here at the next meeting to discuss why he comes to that interpretation. But, it's, there's never going to be, planning board, never gonna have an offline discussion with code enforcement officer. They're simply not permitted. Open meetings law, if there's 3 of them anywhere, having a discussion about planning board business.
Okay,
I think a code enforcement officer has a lot to do with this interpretation. But I'm a little confused on that. I mean, Scott can speak with the code enforcement officer.
Sure. And so can
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I mean, could they all come together?
Does it make sense to do a meeting between Scott, John, and ourselves?
Yeah.
They kind of.
that's up to the code enforcement officer in terms of who he wants to get input for. Right, in the formal process, again, the planning board chair is likely going to reach out and say, we need an interpretation on this issue. And then whatever process the code enforcement officer wants to engage in to come to that decision, you may contact me, you may contact the applicant, you may contact Scott, you may contact, I don't know, anyone else. So, at least that's certainly the thing to do also. And again, the code enforcement officer, when I say that, is a broad department. And it's not necessarily one person, but it's 2.
okay, is that about as far as we can go? I mean, I wish it were clear. I'm sure you wish it were more clear. But that's what we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't always get such a good representation of the applicant either, so I appreciate that. Okay, so we'll go through a few more items, then I'm going to ask if we want to break. And then I actually have probably an hour or more of discussion with a PowerPoint presentation about these very issues on limited industrial and commercial lots. And what we might recommend the code be changed so we have better chances of attracting good businesses to Rush. At the same time, have better protections for safety and appearance than we have now. But that's to follow. Zoning map update status. You may remember at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that the zoning map still had a few problems, like the coloring of the RMD that we couldn't tell from R30 and the wrong names for commercial and limited industrial zones. And John Morelli offered to take up that challenge, and I said he would be my hero if he was able to solve this problem. He is my superhero. So go ahead, John.
So, all right, so a few changes that were made. This, obviously, we can't see anything on this map, it's too small. But we were able to change the color of the RMD, so it's discernible from the background and from the other colors.
We'll show this big one. That's a good one.
Well,
That's the Hamlet.
yeah, there's the Hamlet. And you can see that the RMD is now visible where it was not visible before. We also, oh, yeah, so we also took, you can't see it again, maybe you can on here. Commercial with C-C, which was community commercial, where our code says just C for commercial. So we had the C's changed, the CC's changed to C. We had the.
And then the box here, which describes everything.
Right,
It also is the correct word now, commercial.
right. I'm sorry, I should have brought the larger
that's fine.
scale. But we added the commercial, what's the other one we changed? The
Limited industrial.
limited industrial.
Used to be light industrial.
It was light industrial, so we changed that in the code here, light, to limited industrial. And.
Can I just add one?
Yeah.
I can't read that one, but they all said district and limited industrial did not say district. Is there a distinction between just
Yes,
limited
it was
industrial and
it was
district?
left off, but it's been revised.
Okay, that's why I couldn't see on
Yeah,
that.
we added district
Okay.
to limited industrial.
Is there
commercial.
is there a distinction between if you just said,
No,
No,
no.
okay,
it's
I just noticed everything else a district except that.
Right, yeah, I just said to her, change this to
Okay.
commercial, change this to the,
I-
and she
I-
did.
I
And
would
then I
say
said, oh,
if you hear the word district or the word zone or nothing, they all mean the same.
Okay,
So commercial, nothing, commercial zone, commercial district, all
Okay.
the same thing.
the other thing, I noticed was when you blow this up, there's still some addresses missing. If you look in the Hamlet, area, like this is a blow up of that piece right there. I outlined the commercial zone, but in actuality, there are some more addresses
Oh, that can't fit.
here that just couldn't fit. So here's 5970, that's missing over here. And
So if you blow it up even more, you see the more addresses. Well, that's the other big thing. Street numbers have been added.
Well, yes, but there's still some missing in the Hamlet. And was it John Limbeck who asked about, or was it you that asked about? the
Probably
blow-up?
went bigger.
John asked about, can we have an enlargement? And I'm thinking right down in here, to put an enlargement of the Hamlet area with all the missing numbers. I think that's the only area that we're concerned about. And I haven't heard back from,
Could you explain how you did this? Who you contacted and what the process was?
yeah, so I went to the GIS department in the Monroe County and I looked for the boss. And I called them up and I said, I'm on the planning board, I'm on the comprehensive, I'm on all these things. We have some discrepancies and I gave them examples of what type of things we wanted to change, small things, change community commercial to commercial, change this. And he wrote to Tang-Yan Lee, who is the mechanic that does all that stuff for him. And she said, okay, I'm on it. And she, within a week, was sending me stuff back and forth. Then I got nervous because we didn't go through the regular procedures here, but it turns out that Pam had asked her to do this a long time ago, so we recovered. But in any event, she did it, and my last question to her was, can we do a blow up here? I could do the blow up, but I want to see if she could do it. So
I would put it right below the legend.
what's that?
I would put
Right here?
the inside right below the
Oh,
legend.
inside there?
No, below it, that whole gray area, right?
Yeah.
Oh, over here, yeah.
So,
That's
you know,
bigger.
as an ArcGIS user, I know that there's limitations to labeling. Depending on how you set it up.
Right,
So, sometimes if it doesn't fit, it doesn't get put in.
right.
So that's the limitations that you're probably dealing with as far as not showing addresses. There are also some properties that technically don't have an address.
Right, right. And I don't
In
know.
the database.
I don't know outside of the ham, because I did kind of look at the property viewer for the Hamlet, and I did find some missing pieces.
I think there can be vacant lots. And I mean, I truly mean vacant that don't have street address.
Yeah, we own a
Yeah.
lot that has no street
We,
address.
so we face that with some of our applications where people want to put a new house, a residence on a lot. And you ask for the address and they don't put it in. Well, if they don't state it's between this one and this one, you don't know where to go look.
Right, right. Yep.
No, it's
I've asked the
awesome.
assessor for an address for our lot, and he said, no. Okay. He says, you have no house there, don't worry about it. In any event, so right now, Tanyan Lee mailed 3 copies of the enlarged map to Pam. She was looking for 2 copies and she was gonna laminate one and put it up on the base. I asked for a third one for the planning board. I didn't know we wanted. I thought it'd be a good thing that we used to have
here.
one.
Yeah, could be one up here.
Yeah, we used to have one here. The next step is to look at a blow up. And if I hear back from her that it's not possible, then I will see about getting the addresses and doing our own little version of it in here.
It's possible. Okay,
All right,
A+ for John.
thank you.
I did have some questions as far as why the creek and the trail are zoned, but
I'm sorry, the trail is what?
the creek
The
in
creek.
that inset, the hamlet,
Yes,
we have the area shown as Honey Creek, as well as the Lehigh Valley Trail are zoned,
and it's not obvious in here at all. Is that what you're saying?
but I'm just wondering why they're zoned.
So if you go into section 120-3 in the zoning code, there's a section called official zoning map, interpretation of district boundaries, and I think that gets at what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was asking, is how do we define like that one, that one parcel that has commercial in the front and R20 in the back?
It says where uncertainties exist as to the boundaries of districts, boundaries indicated as approximately following the center lines of streets, highways, and railroad tracks shall be construed to follow center lines. Okay, so it says if it's about at the line of a street, it is at the center line. Boundaries indicated as approximately following lot lines shall be construed to follow such lot lines. Boundaries indicated as following shorelines of ponds, blah, 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 shall be construed as following the actual shoreline. Boundaries indicated as following center lines of streams, parallel to extensions of features. So construed distances not specifically indicated zoning map shall be determined by the scale of the map. Overlay boundaries based on natural features. May be more precisely estimated through field investigation by qualified professionals. So I think it tries to say, do what's logical. Probably what it says, and things aren't perfect.
Yeah, my point is the Lehigh Valley Trail is a linear park.
Yep.
It's a linear park.
Yeah, no, that should be there. The other thing, two other things. One is there were a couple of properties that had two districts. And I looked up one of them. It was a Chase farm or whatever. And in the county documentation, it actually had two parcels on that land. So I figured, okay, I guess that covers it. One was residential, the other was commercial agriculture.
And there still are lots that are broken down the middle that wouldn't help you with.
And I asked her if she could check to see if any of them were map errors, and she said they are not.
Yeah. So her answer was, if you don't like it, get the town board to change it. Seriously,
Right.
because as far as she sees it, it's law, right? She can't change it because we think it's a good
And
idea.
she also said that this is not by any means considered an official map in the county. It's just something they do with the service they provide for us. So if the town wants it to be official, the board has to vote on it, say, this is the official map of the town.
Okay,
So,
good enough.
you know,
Well, go back to 1025 and then, I'm back to
Mhm.
talking about, because it's listed as a residential house in the Monroe County
Yeah,
property thing, and assessment
right.
here in the town says residential. How do we get that fixed?
well, the assessor is aware of it now because we communicated today. So hopefully he understands that whatever happens next, it has to be fixed. We can't go through another assessment with it being wrong.
Right.
Right. So he's aware, that's all I can say. And it is the assessor who controls that.
Okay,
So I actually sent an email to the county real estate director and asked him who controls the real estate portal. And he came back and said it's 100% the assessor in each town.
okay,
And in fact, if you click on contacts in the real estate portal, it takes you to a list of the towns and the assessors and town clerk.
okay. So that's been addressed.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it's foggy for sure.
okay. Thank you.
Now, that's a good question. But it's. Man, everything you do in this town, you pick up a rock out in the field, right? And you see all these creepy crawler creatures come out. That's the way our town code is. Everything, every rock you pick up, always
There's all the
problems
stuff.
crawl out. All right.
I thought it was interesting that guy that took over that business was prudent and did everything to get the right approvals. I'm wondering whether it was properly done. I mean, our town representative.
Yeah,
Right.
We don't
Sound
know.
like it doesn't.
There are other things that happen in the town during that time frame also.
the other problem we run into is there's been substantial changeover, not so much Limbeck, but with the code enforcement officer. Limbeck's been here a little while.
Planning board clerks.
Yeah,
All the time.
okay. Credit for training. So we talked, when I gave that 2 3/4 hours at the previous meeting for all of that stuff. Thank you for thanking me. The question was, how do we get credit? And I said we agreed that I would send a letter of accreditation, which I did with no authority, so to speak, but it was addressed at the town board meeting. I forget what date it was, but one of the previous ones soon after that meeting. And it was discussed. There was some mention that, it made sense to give some credit. They weren't really sure if it should be minute by minute or it should be like 50% of the time for that type of thing. So I thought, Robert, you had the action item to make a proposal. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct, Jim. I was working on a resolution regarding training. The board also, I maybe you can speak better than I could because I wasn't at the most recent meeting. There was also questions related to training for non-planning board training questions as well. So that resolution might be a bigger one with that.
Okay, more clarification coming then.
Yeah, more clarification. Definitely. No, I wasn't, as you may know, I was at the Association of Towns Conference in Florida, so I haven't caught up as to what happened on the monthly.
Pam mentioned that.
General, agreement that the internet for sexual harassment training that all employees have to go to.
Yeah.
And it was decided, yes, all employees should go to that. But that if you had worked for 2 employers and it was required at one, in my situation, I took the training provided and, Carl's waved his hand. It was mandated at my firm. And that was acceptable. I had a certificate of completion, sent that in, and they accepted that last year, and was general consensus that that situation would be acceptable if you had to take it somewhere else, that we'd accept it.
With the caveat that you would also get a copy of the town's policy.
Oh, yes, you have to read the
Right.
town's policy.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So we've had, suffice to say, we've actually had a lot of questions on training since our last meeting. So it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay.
It will be addressed.
Okay,
Now,
good.
Pam mentioned that when she goes to training, she only gets like about half the hours that she actually puts in. But like, that's because they have coffee and cake there, like, not like Scott, I mean, he doesn't stop, so
I'm gonna give you a break before I start.
Yeah,
I want extra points.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Well,
What's half credit?
yeah, typically a session will have a certain amount of continuing education units or professional development hours.
Yeah.
And that is approved typically by whatever overseeing board. I know for the engineering, that when I go to those, that's you usually have get that 1 PDH for the hour that you've been there, but
I know for CPA, it's like 50 minutes just to give 1 credit.
That's what it is for lawyers.
Yeah, that's even better. That's,
But it has to be at least that.
That was kind of written up in the state laws of guidance that like 55 minutes was an hour. Something like that. Now, I'm not saying that's state law. I'm just saying that was used as an example in that discussion of the state law. Okay. Before we get, well, we got a lot to get through. Maybe I won't do any training tonight. The town board proposal to change a residential front setback on state and county roads to 100 feet, which would be the same then as town roads from the current 110 feet. So I think that might have been, did Valerie hand that out? I think we saw it a week earlier too. Yeah. Yeah, it's in the blue handout. So I did note that even looking at the 1025 Russian Meadow Town Line Road map, the county road right of way is 66 feet versus a town road right of way is 60 feet. And that 60 feet is in the specifications in the town code. So you start off with the fact that county road right of ways and state and county road right of ways are wider than town road right of ways. Most towns, I'd say the vast majority of towns, specify setbacks based on distance from the right of way. Rush is not unique, but unusual in that it specifies it from the center line. So the point I would make is that if you made the setbacks the same for all roads, you are in fact making the setback from the right of way less for state and county roads instead of more, which
I still, no one has told me why this change is being
it's a good
proposed.
question. How did this come up as a need?
I think there was a question from maybe the building inspector, that precipitated all of this. And so then we were looking at it and we were just like, well, why can't we just make it consistent? Generally,
Which sounds practical,
it's not, we thought it would be a practical thing.
Yeah.
And maybe the highway department was involved too, weighed in on it, I believe he did, didn't see any reason why it wouldn't work. So then we thought, this seemed like an easy fix and no problem. So we at the board got it through our workshop and got it set for a hearing. Nobody said anything of the hearing, public hearing. But then we stopped short of approving it because it occurred to us that we never sent it to you guys to look at it. Like, are we missing something? That, what are we not thinking of? So we put it on hold pending the review.
I have a couple comments.
Go right ahead.
So you're right. Generally, state and county road can be 66 feet or 4 rods. However, 5 Points Road is 3 rod, 49.5 feet. Middle Road is 3 rod, 49.5 feet. Honey Falls number 6 road is 49.5 feet. Works Road is 49.5 feet. West Rush Road, Rush Road, is 66 feet west of 15, and the section between 15 and 5 Points is 49.5. So obviously right of ways vary.
Okay.
So it depends. Most of the roads in Rush are 2-lane open drainage with ditches on each side. A new county road would probably have a 4 or 5 foot, a 4 or 6 foot shoulder. However, most county roads now have a 2 foot shoulder, very narrow. So they're really, that's why I'm asking, why, so, for example, 15 coming down through the interchange, up by the, across from the barn, that area is 5 lanes. 5 lanes wide as the median, 2 lanes on each side. So that right of way is 110 feet. That house just south of on the west side is only set back 70 feet from the center line. But it's basically only 20 feet back from the right of way. So, I mean, that's an existing case. We wouldn't, but if a house, if that was torn down and you had to follow a new a new rule, you're 100 foot off the center line, would then still put that house closer to the property line than other situations. So I guess that's, if a road is widened 3 lanes with shoulders, with enclosed drainage, curbs, whatever, there's a whole slew of highway considerations. That would maybe require either change in the right of way or something along that line. So I'm not sure, again, it doesn't seem to make any difference whether it's 110 feet or 100 feet. But I just don't know why they want to make that change.
In that case, for R20 district,
It's all residential, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But it's different for commercial and so on, okay? So the change is in an R20 district, to make that, this thought was 100-foot setback to be, state or county, and all other roads would be the same in an R20.
Well, it's not just R20. And that's
All
one
right,
of the
that's R20,
complaints I have with this
all
form.
of the Rs.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Right, it's all of these.
yes.
There should be
yes,
some
all of it.
indication.
It was just, I just wanted to ask, what was the reason that was asked for? Was there a certain approval or a situation that a structure didn't meet setback and
No,
No, my
not
recollection.
that came to my attention.
No, yeah, my recollection was John Lindbeck talking about how it didn't make sense to him and whoever he spoke to the highway department about having different limits for all others versus state or county road. And asking for the board to consider it to be consistent. I know that the board also considered it for commercial for the same reasons. But I believe in that, what you're looking at, that commercial is not changed. And that's, I think in commercial, there was a lot more concern about making that setback 100 as opposed to 140 for some commercial businesses on state and county roads. So there was a lot more discussion about that, and that wasn't changed.
okay, my point is, the change seems arbitrary. It doesn't seem, I don't see a study in front of me saying this is why we want to make that change. That's what I would like to see. I mean, it makes sense. Anytime that we want to make a change, I'd like to know the precedent behind it. So that's my issue. Not so much that the change doesn't make sense. I asked the question, why are we changing? And no one's got.
I doubt that anybody even looked at what the right of ways were for these various types of roads. Well, I mean, my view was that state and county roads are a lot busier. They're typically have more traffic because that's the nature of them. And it provides some advantage. Plus, they're also more likely to get more lanes added. And it's not uncommon in other towns to have different setbacks for state and county versus town roads. So it's not that we're unusual in Rush. It's more the fact that we specify from the center line.
I think
So I agree. I don't see the driving force to make the change.
I would propose that the response be that those examples you just gave, Carl, about the different sections, just to point out all this variation and say to make this change without more across the board look at what it means seems we're not ready for it.
Asking the question, why?
The other thing is, I guess it bothers me. When I first started looking at this, I was looking R20, what about, or doesn't that count? There should be something
Oh, yeah.
to let that goes all the way down. And this here, 140 feet from the center line of the road, all of these are from the center line of the road, are they not?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know
Yeah,
why.
why do they distinguish that?
Yeah,
Well, you're right. You have to go to a definition somewhere else to understand that it's center line.
right.
And just so you know, sometimes the center line of the road is not the center line of the right of way.
Oh.
So this says setback, structure shall be set back the following distance from the highway central line.
So, yeah, there's,
Oh, I see. It does say it right there.
I thought I saw it, but I couldn't find it.
it is to me. Yeah. It's. I mean, typically a center line of a road, especially in this area, you know, that there was this, the same center line right away, but how many times I've come into, you know,
Well, what summary would we give? We'd say we don't understand the value of the change when there's so much complexity in right of ways of various roads.
well, correct me if I'm wrong, a town road industrial is 60, but a residential would be 50.
Commercial roads, if they're town roads, would be 60, same as any road. Commercial road and a town road, well,
Right.
town road is the same whether it's residential or commercial.
Okay, so
It's 60.
it's 60.
60. How's that compared to these numbers?
That's the right of way width. So I just got out of it, but if you go into the A125 design standards,
Right.
and all the different roads are in there.
Right.
It'll show you the dimensions of the road, and they'll say that's the right of way. And they're 60 feet for town roads,
Okay.
Commercial-
this is
commercial,
For building,
but that's right of way. This is setback from the center of the road.
right?
Now, I haven't looked at the town typical section, what the lane widths are. You know, it's a 30-foot pavement, 15-foot lane type of thing. But county roads are typically 11-foot lanes. State roads are typically 12-foot lanes. That's just by their standards.
Right.
So, you know, if you got a 5-lane road and for the state, that's 60 feet wide. So you're obviously, that's why the interchange is so much wider,
So you're saying state is typically 10 feet,
12 feet,
state is 12, county is, or what?
11.
County is 11. And town,
Why?
well,
That's crazy.
it would be in the
Right,
design standard.
And sometimes they'll just do a 30-foot wide pavement section. And you know, can put a left turn lane, you know, 3 10-foot lanes or 2 15s. But then your bike lanes, your shoulders, that all plays into design typically. Obviously, West Rush Road, East River Road, we don't have bike lanes, we don't have a way to, you know, people are taking lives in their own hands walking along that road. So it's that's what but if they ever got upgraded, you would typically see wider shoulders. The bridges typically have a 6-foot shoulder. In addition, so the bridge width's wider than the road itself. And then there's a transition back to this narrower. So I'm just saying there's a lot of considerations that I don't understand. You know, the reason for making the change, and should we be changing our code to go from property line rather than center line?
Right, so I would say there's enough questions to hold off on it.
Is it possible to somebody to write up a brief description of your concerns about making changes?
I could write something up.
I'd appreciate it.
That
Yes.
would be great. Thank you.
Thank
And I
you.
can bring back to the board as to why.
Yeah, especially because there's no pressing issue. It was just a question that was brought up. We have enough pressing issues.
We do, but, you know, we thought, oh, easy, you know,
Right.
let's just make it
Yep.
the same. And
Well, I think it also gives a chance for the building inspector to, you know, lay out his thought process, because that, I mean, that first step of the draft was the change.
the building inspector.
Yeah, I mean, that's my recollection. Is that this was
Yeah.
John.
But I doubt if anybody was aware other than Carl of the complexity
Right.
of the road situation.
Yeah, that's what made me pause, because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
As evidenced by.
And it's hard to, we have to force Carl to speak in feet instead of rods, you know.
It's okay. I could have spoken in metric. The state uses 3.66 meters.
Okay,
The county uses.
Okay,
3.3
well, that's-
meters.
okay, so one more little topic and then we'll decide what we want to do from here on, but the only other thing I did not list on the agenda, but we talked about at the January meeting was the fact that the private road code that was A 125-60, or I should say 60, private roads from 2014 was never added to the town code. And Gene, I thought you had the action to bring that up and say, how do we,
Which one's that?
okay, so it's local law 1 of 2014,
Oh,
okay? And it is about private roads. It was to be designated as A 125-60 in the town code, and it was never added after.
I did bring that up, to the town clerk, who wasn't, she had asked for that, but she said that she would follow up on it.
Okay,
I did bring it up at a board. meeting.
okay, so I brought it up to her more than a year ago now, and it's still not there. So John, could you take the,
Yeah.
maybe you could talk with general code and see if they would add that for us. Okay, so I do want to get through the new special permit application form. Do we want to take a break? And we may have to postpone my long presentation on light industrial and commercial, which might go on for months because we won't have time next month either, but I do want to talk about new special permit application. Can we keep going or somebody need a biological break? Okay, we're good. I'm one of the older ones here, so I'm good. We're all.
I took a break. And I was-
Okay. So hopefully in our packet, Valerie included the current special application form and the proposed new one.
Yep.
Okay, so the current one is a very simple one page. And you will. There are 3 things that we tried to improve on the new one. The one was very evident to our applicant or the owner of 1025 Russian into Town Line Road when he asked, what is a special permit? And what does it mean that you can or can't grant one? So this was an attempt to get that issue by on the new one on page 1 at the bottom. It says the planning board can only approve special uses that are listed in the town code. Consider the code sections below that are specific to your zoning district and any other code sections to determine if the special use you are requesting is listed in the town code and therefore is a use that the planning board can potentially approve. Okay, and it lists them there. Those are all the parts of the code that I could find that stated special permits. So we want the applicant to say, oh gosh, it has to be listed there, stated something to do where the planning board can't do it. Do I expect that to work all the time? Heck, no. Because I actually had an addendum that we're handing out with that information for anybody who wants a special permit, and it still left them dazzled or baffled. So that was the one thing.
I had some comments on that.
Yep. So we'll get to John's, and yours are good.
Okay.
The other big one was page 2, comment on the following general requirements from Town Code 12069D. So that is the planning board section of the town code that creates the planning board and gives us our authority. And D is about special permits. Those are directly copied out of it. So those are all things by the code we have to consider. This is an attempt to list them there so that the applicant can give their opinion of how their special permit meets those requirements. That was not in the old document. Right. And lastly, is stated at the bottom of the second page, what you should know about special permits, and I would change that to conditions that apply to all special permits. And these, in fact, are things I would list on every special permit unless we have a reason not to, as some of the conditions. So in addition to specifics, like you can only have 3 employees, I would put these 3 general ones there, actually 4 general ones. One is special permit shall be deemed to authorize only one particular special use and shall expire if the special use ceases for more than 6 months for any reason. That actually is right in the code. That's not something we have a choice on. But these others are not as specifically stated in the code, but I think have other either history or inferences in the code. And the second one is special permits expire upon transfer of the property for which the special permit was issued. They do not carry over to new owners. That comes about because that's what the planning board has assumed and documented in the past. And when special permits were created from temporary use permits, that was a condition.
So is the special permit is specifically issued to the landowner or the business owner?
Yep.
So
Essentially.
so their name is on it.
Right.
So when they no longer own the property or run the business, then that special permit would, and that's our,
That's the intent.
okay.
Right. So it's with the owner, that owner, while he owns it, and doesn't carry over to a new one. So it's not like a variance.
Not transferable.
Now, that's, I would say controversial, because think about something like a 2-family dwelling. Right? Somebody builds a 2-family dwelling, gets a special permit to operate as a 2-family dwelling, then they want to sell it. Well, the new owner coming in may or may not get a special permit. I wouldn't think we'd have much incentive to deny it, but planning board wouldn't have to. So that's pretty significant. Number 3, special permits may be revoked upon the property owners or leasees' failure to comply with the approved description of use, conditions, and limitations as stated in any approvals. Again, that comes out of the creation of special permit from temporary use permits. That was the condition of temporary use permits, and special permits cannot be modified after approval. This was a ruling by the previous lawyer. It said changes to the approved description of use, conditions, limitations can only be made using an application for a new special permit. At that time, any or all prior approved description of use, conditions, and limitations can be reconsidered by the planning board as part of the approval process for the new special permit. If a new special permit is denied, the prior one remains in effect. So this, in fact, came up when John's neighbor, who has the dog training business, wanted to come back and get a modification of their special permit. We said, we ran it by the John Mancuso, and he said, no, there's no modification process. You have to apply for a new one. So those are what I'm assuming are all the conditions that would apply to any special permit. And again, I would recommend we attach them to any special permit that we write as the conditions.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, it sounds like you understand as well, but putting in the application isn't going to make the conditions, they're also going to be written as conditions to the resolution.
Right.
Right.
That was my
They'll
intent.
have no effect, it'll just be as sort of as you have
It's
written here.
kind of like a reminder.
Yeah, so
yeah.
you know, these are the going to be the
But Scott, the second one, and I wholeheartedly agree with the notion that these special permits should
I think I know
expire.
what you're gonna say. Oh, the second one. Okay.
Yeah, should expire upon transfer of the property, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just wondering if building a 2-story, 2-family home, where there is some irreversible, I don't know how to word it,
I know. Yep.
it seems like if you get permit, a special permit, maybe it shouldn't be a special permit. I mean, to build a
Let me
2-family.
say this, so in my list of wishes of how to improve the code. If I could, I would take 2-family homes as a possibility out of R30. I would keep it in R20. I would keep it certainly in RMD, and I would probably make them directly permitted rather than with a special permit. That would eliminate that problem. But My view is if you want a two-family home in an R30, which is intended to be, wide open residential, it's kind of a luxury, and it's not something you're entitled to do. But let's just say that whatever the town board eventually would decide about two-family homes and whether they should be directly permitted and in what districts, that your question ought to be part of that thinking.
Right, okay.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. The other one I should have pointed out, it's the next one, revoked upon property owners or lessees failure to comply. That's a nice statement, but there's no methodology of how to do that. My assumption would be, and Robert's well aware of this, my assumption would be that it would be up to the code enforcement officer to decide when somebody is out of conformance. I would hope that that would be brought to the planning board for a hearing, a public hearing, and decided in a more democratic way than just a decision of the code enforcement officer. But that is not stated there, and that is not required.
And I wonder, if it's in the town code anywhere?
I don't think so.
I wonder if it's might be a town law requirement. I know that in my experience, in order to revoke a special use permit, there is a due process hearing required. I normally do see it actually in front of the town board. But I don't know, but the one I'm thinking of is in town code. I don't know if it's.
Okay. So that's a New York town code is what you're saying, not
It may
the
very well
Rush
be a
town code.
law matter, but I don't know that.
Okay,
So
I mean,
I'll look into the revocation of special use permits and what the town law states.
It makes sense that there would be a due process.
So if a person, property owner fails to comply with the description of use conditions and limitations as stated in any approval, how is that different? I mean, what if they didn't have a special permit, they didn't need a special permit, but they were doing something that was in violation of
town code,
something else? I mean, how is that different,
like outside storage.
like outside storage?
So, it being that example, I could have a special permit to run a elementary school.
Right.
Taking that away is a different matter than saying,
Then what?
you need to clean up your outside storage.
Right.
Those are two different due process issues. I think, and my guess is, again, I haven't looked at town law, but
Well, I mean, by-
town codes say that's a different issue. You're taking away someone's use of the property or livelihood. You would require you special public hearing.
But if somebody is violating some approved description of use, isn't that in and of itself a violation regardless of the special permit?
Well, it's intended to mean the use indicated by the use allowed by the special permit.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
Conditions should be, this is just general, conditions should be related to either the site plan, or special use permit.
Okay.
It shouldn't be unrelated.
Yeah.
I think that term description of use conditions and limitations, I think that's right in the special permit, right on. In the section 69.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay, so John did have a few good suggestions.
These, I sent these to
Yes,
to
you did.
They're in the.
Valerie, you did copy those as well? I sent them on to Valerie. Okay. No, yeah. No.
They were all paper.
That one?
Yes.
Yes, right.
It's attached to this one.
Okay. More pages.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm slow.
Right. So, yeah, this is this page, is it this for the stamp? Is that what that's for?
Yes,
Yes,
that
okay.
is for the receipt.
Yes. Applicant suggests, so what's changed, I think, I don't know, do we need to know the relationship to the owner? If the applicant is not the owner?
Yeah, so this is the idea of a leasing, like
Right,
this would be a case we had in 1025 tonight, right? So the leasing who's different than the owner. And I think in the site plan and subdivision application, we do have lines for both of those people. And I think you're right, we should do the same thing here.
Okay. And then again, do we need the property owner's name if different? I think we do, right?
I would say yes.
And we have asked, I think we've asked for.
So
zone.
I'm sorry, I think we can use the subdivision and site plan application as an example of how we might want to handle this first section.
Oh, okay. Do we want the property zone? It's right below.
It is.
It's the same thing, right?
Okay, yeah. I
What is
don't
the
know
difference?
that.
So that,
And contact information, okay. I put in overlay district, I don't know, I mean, it's something new. I didn't know we wanted it in there or not,
it doesn't hurt. It's,
okay?
it probably is a good idea, and I'll tell you why. I was gonna get to this later. In addition to problems with commercial and limited industrial zones that we really need to fix quickly, the hamlet has a lot of zoning problems. It's zoned commercial. Commercial does not allow churches, does not allow public buildings like this town hall, like the library and like the history building they want to put next door. It may, I discovered this, I think, looking at Henrietta's town code. Henrietta uses an overlay
Right.
as a way to create more versatility in an existing zone. And it seems people tend to think that having a residential overlay with the right stipulations like public buildings and so on over the commercial zone that we have now might be the best way to handle it. So commercial zone, or I'm sorry, overlays could become more important. And that's probably, you're probably right.
So overlay, solar overlay, residential or whatever.
And spot zones?
The next thing, I just, just to get more specific here, can approve. Planning board can only approve special permits for a use that is listed in the town code.
So your point is that a special permit applies to only one use,
Well,
only one special use.
well, I guess I'm saying that the planning board doesn't approve uses, it approves permits.
Oh,
I mean, that was.
okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah, you're right. If you added all that, then you're right. Yeah, that was poorly stated.
So, and then the highlighted section, I don't remember why I highlighted. I added relevant, but there was something else. I guess it wasn't that important.
It may have already been highlighted.
What's that?
It may have already been highlighted.
It should have been, yeah, those were taken out. So Val, those yellow highlights got to go.
Maybe you had it highlighted. for
I don't know how to
reason
get rid of them.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that was there? That was there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't put it there.
So, yeah, to get rid of them. I would have, but I don't know how to get rid of them.
I
Okay,
can do.
and then,
But no, we're treating,
to determine if the special use being requested is listed in the town.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Those are, I mean, those are improvements.
Next, page on the top. State which code section or sections are applicable and why. I don't know.
That's fine.
Um,
Anybody else wants to weigh in, please do.
Next one, explain your proposal plus any other related outcomes, use, expectation, or function, etc. That was just to make it clear that we want to know. We say, explain your proposal in detail, include anticipated changes in traffic, parking requirements, days and hours, operation, number of employees, and maximum number of people on the site at one time. Plus any other related outcome, use.
That's fine.
Expectations. Under comments on the final journal, the proposed use of a particular location is necessary or desirable, provide a service or facility which will contribute to the general well-being of the neighborhood or community, and explain how the service or facility would contribute. I don't know, I'd like to see that, but I don't know. It's fun. And same thing regarding detriments, will the proposed use be detrimental to the neighborhood? And if so, how might it be detrimental?
They're all good.
Sort of
Well then, Valerie, you want to take a crack at that, adding John's suggestions?
Taking the yellow out.
Take the yellow out.
Yes, I can do all that.
And so maybe you can refer to the, again, the subdivision and site plan to see how we provided lines for both the applicant and the owner. I think because it can be different.
Did I send this to you in a Word document or?
I sent it to
Oh,
Val.
you sent
You didn't.
Sorry, I'm gonna bring us back a second. So the very last change is back in October, number 2. Location use of the building, whether or not the proposed use should be detrimental to neighboring property, and if so, how it might be detrimental to neighboring property.
Or you could just say yes, so how? Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't want the applicant to be confused into thinking they need to explain how their use would be detrimental to neighboring properties, because they need to actually argue the opposite, that it's not detrimental to neighboring properties. You know what I mean? Or like, for instance, you understand what I'm saying? So I read that to say, so how would it be detrimental? If I'm the applicant, I want to be arguing how it's not a detriment to neighboring.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it goes back to whether or not the
Right,
proposed
whether
use.
or not it is, if it is, how is it detrimental?
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So you reckon we have to scratch the addition?
Take that out.
Yeah.
Because you're not gonna get a valid answer anyway. Okay. Well, I remember, I
We
remember,
were watching. you.
Yeah, you're asking them to say,
I
hey,
re-
can you tell us why you didn't
Yeah.
get rejected?
I remember a certain interview process where you essentially ask the applicants, are you ethical? So how would you ever get a no answer to that, right? If the person is ethical, they're gonna say, of course I am. And if they're not ethical, they're gonna say, of course I am.
Yeah.
No, you have to say, what would he tell me if I asked him what you would say? There's some.
Okay, so we have not adopted this yet, but we're hopefully aiming at a maybe next meeting to get to it and adopt what we'll have at that time. And Robert's gonna try to get some more information on the revocation issue.
Yeah. On my list.
And when Don might be ready for it to go. If approval, because I guess apparently the town board has to approve all, you know.
Yeah, I think that's an arguable point, but I think you just said with fine. I think you'll like it.
So is someone going
I
to,
wasn't there, so because I'm saying,
Yes.
so what you tell us and.
No, I do think it's best practice that we've been doing so far to have the town board just take this.
And probably the point there is just, consistency. Just
We've done.
one, they know what's going on. Two, if there's other forms being used by other groups, then may want to make sure that we're using formats and it's just some.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
So if I have this all corrected, do you want it to come back to you and then?
Yeah, send it to me and I can see if it meets what I thought we talked about. So we're not ready to go to the town board yet. I think I'd like. So we really have to discuss it in person again at a future meeting. As a planning board, and we can agree that, yeah, this is what we want, or whatever last change we want to make, and then we can send it to the town board, but I don't, we're close, but not quite there yet. And that's just the way the open meeting law makes us work.
is someone gonna ask the town clerk about this private road law? Who's your point?
Well, Jean said that she already has. I don't know if we have comfort that,
I did.
yeah.
I don't know what to do. Beyond that, I asked at a town board meeting.
You were joking when you said I should.
I was joking.
Oh, good, okay. I got nervous
Only
because I had good luck.
if you want to continue to be
call
my,
it
if you want to
Tanya.
continue to be my superhero, like you're gonna have to keep.
Okay,
Okay. No, I was joking.
oh, good.
I
Thank
probably
you.
shouldn't do that on a recorded
Oh, right.
meeting. I'm gonna go right now to future meetings, item number 6. And so in your handout, so we know the situation with the 1025 rush end of the Town Line Road. We're expecting to get more information from the building inspector and code enforcement officer. It's really up to the applicants if they want to continue on with the applications they have already submitted for a special permit and site plan. We will have the public hearing. And we'll have to reach our decision at that time. The other one that has come up is an informal review, and that is in your packet. That is for 7566 West Henrietta Road. That is the so-called J. Crew Farm. I have not looked at it, so I don't know what he's asking. He had actually asked if he could get on the March meeting for a real special permit and site plan, and I said, no, you didn't meet the deadline. We would be willing to shorten the deadline for this informal review. So we'll be doing another informal review next week, in addition to whatever we do for 1025 Rush Henrietta Town Line Road. Okay.
I hate to ask this question, but this is young commercial.
It is. I don't know what he's asking for.
Special
He's
permit,
asking
site
for a
plan,
farm.
asking for a farm.
As I read the commercial code, farming is not allowed. Not even vegetable and field crops.
I know, but there was some argument, I think, about whether this was actually commercial or not commercial. Even though everywhere that I've seen it says commercial, but
Well, and if you go to the other page, it says, I would like to operate my small landscape company on 1 acre of my land on weekdays. Well, landscape business is commercial, so
Right.
that is an allowed
That's
use. That's the one that's allowed, not the
Right.
farm.
right.
So like I said, I haven't read this.
Okay.
That's the first I've seen it.
In storage of material.
Storage is not allowed. And you're
Right.
storing a lot.
Yeah.
Storing a lot.
I have a picture of it
Is that not allowed in any zone?
in any zone.
Except agricultural,
But
and
different
that's
provisions.
with
It's not the
setbacks.
Same, not an overarching. Vision. It's what I'm looking at here. It's a commercial district has specific provision. I thought living industrial had the same exact provision.
For outside storage.
Yeah.
Yeah, commercial and
Separate,
commercial and living industrial both say no outside storage.
but they're two separate, my point is that there were two separate sections of the code. So it's not like one section of the
Right.
code saying no outside storage.
Right, and there's another one for residential actually, but it's totally separate.
Yeah.
Well, that's the soil burn with wildflower. That's not storage.
Which is not, I mean, it is nice that it is.
If that's the
It
intent.
is hidden.
But yeah,
It is hidden. I don't know if they do storage.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Because when they put that, there was a lot of dead wood and stuff in it.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
This is gonna be a
yeah,
tough
I
one.
gotta look it up.
So by all means, you want to visit that property. Okay,
Be careful if you visit the property.
There's a sign, there's a gate on there now, no trespassing.
is there?
Yeah, and from go back to the honeybee area in the backfield.
Okay.
I buy it almost every day.
Any other business, item number 7, there is a proposal for a new code update committee. So as John Humbeck and I were going around on some of the issues like we listened to tonight and in the Hamlet with the zoning code that is very restrictive. I think people are beginning to recognize the severity, significance of the problems we're facing. And John Humbeck proposed, why don't we have a new committee that has 2 members of the planning board, since you can't have more than two members of the zoning board, maybe 2 members of the town board, the building inspector. maybe the code enforcement officer, and get together and start working on some of these issues. So that's on the table. It's ultimately up to the town board to decide if they wanted to kick off that sort of thing. And I said I would be willing to participate, and I would support having 2 members of the planning board. You come to mind, John, just because you're the head of the comprehensive plan update committee. So that would tie that in, which ought to be done. But if anybody wants to be on that committee, let me know. It should have come about. It's not done yet. We haven't really decided, but it's certainly on the table. Janie, again, can you add anything about the reception of the town board to that sort of thing?
I did reach out. I have not heard back.
Okay.
Because it just seemed to be taking on the light,
Yeah.
you know, and we have some momentum, so. Let's keep going with it because everybody can keep. We have a workshop this coming Monday that I can talk about it.
Oh, a town board workshop.
Yes,
Yeah.
town board workshop.
Okay.
I know you're on vacation.
Is it this Monday?
Yes.
We're not leaving till the 5th, I believe. Okay.
That's Sunday.
First is tomorrow.
All right, so all right, we'll be going to leave. We'll be leaving on the 5th. We'll be leaving on the 5th. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like I can't attend if it's Monday.
So I'm
Right,
wondering,
Yeah.
was this board's got to be, needs to always be the same 2 people.
Bring up, you can email me.
I'm sorry.
You can email me with anything in particular.
Okay. Okay. My input would simply be that group, if it's formed, would prioritize all the issues. I would think that the Hamlet and this limited industrial commercial issue would be the 2 big ones that are right at the top. Everything else, I think, is not as significant. Not everything else is a relative inconvenience compared to those 2, which really threaten to try to undo legitimate businesses.
I was just wondering whether it would need or should be the same 2 people. I don't know about the other boards, but you know, I know we have different expertise and backgrounds over here. Might be. It's a thought. Makes sense.
Not sure exactly what you're suggesting.
Well, I'm thinking, I don't know anything about rods,
Chains and rods.
chains and rods. Well, I do.
Well, if you're, for example, suggesting you'd rather see somebody else other than you, I'd certainly be open to that. The only issue is then do you feel okay not having somebody from the comprehensive plan committee there? And
well,
because
Yeah.
you can't be there representing the comprehensive plan, and Carl, because I think I'm gonna do it, but just because I've done so much figuring out what all the issues are. But if it's Carl representing the planning board and me, then you can't be there, right? Because that makes 3 of us.
3.
Three's a
Okay,
crowd.
well, that's,
2's a couple, 3's a crowd.
but depending on the focus, whatever we're talking about, at this particular time, it might make sense to have something. different. Whatever. Leave it at that.
How do you feel about it?
I would be glad to have a consulting role. involved.
Okay. Okay,
What's that?
well, we don't have to
Just a
decide
consulting
tonight.
role, that's all I.
We do not have to decide tonight, because we're not quite there yet. So you know the issue and you will be thinking. Okay. So we will continue to work in training. Robert and I have talked about the 3 issues we'd like potentially to see from him, which is kind of the overall processes for subdivision site plans, special permits that are embedded in New York law, and how we do what we do and why we do it. Seeker, which is a big one, complicated one, and then ethics, which you already heard a little bit about, but there's a lot more to it. So those three topics, Robert's thinking about them and gonna be preparing something.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously we have materials, but I also, as I said, went to the New York Association of Towns annual meeting. They have really great annual case law updates and whatnot. So I can take some of those very rates and decisions. Have those too.
So we have plenty of real planning board business in the coming month, and we'll continue to work in more training. I have something I'd like everybody to see on flag lots, which Carl has already seen. And I have something that I don't think anybody else has seen on residential issues, at least not quite in the form I have it. And there's a number of them beyond accessory apartments. That can be it unless you're willing to stay even longer and listen to my limited industrial and commercial presentation. I have a lot of pictures about what other towns are doing, what we ought to be doing, and what our issues are, which you already have a good idea of. But you're not gonna insult me if you think that's long enough. Not many boards stay this long.
For me, it's not so much a question of the time as the content. I have a head full of stuff right now.
Fair enough.
Is that, would you be willing to share that slide deck ahead of time, or you?
I can do that. I can send it to you.
Yeah,
Yep.
you're able to sound like it.
Okay, we'll do that. So what I do is make a PDF out of it. So it's not as convenient as going through it. And the reason I do that is to maintain my control of it, so people don't go changing it. And my name's on it, so with the PDF, you can't change, but it has all the information, just not quite as convenient going slide by slide.
All right.
Not very willing to do that. Okay. And by all means, bounce back with your comments or questions.
I think you're having enough detail in your presentation that you can go through that on.
Huge amount of pictures. I'll let you come over here and. Let's do a presentation, make it big.
Bottom is a screen.
There we go. I had them, okay. You can see that. I'll turn it the other way. This is IPSI when they were in 1025, rushing the other Town Line Road.
Oh, my.
They had dumpsters sitting on the lawn right at the road, 2 of them. They had a storage trailer back here on the lawn. They had a 20-foot roll-off back here. Parking all over the place. So they were hugely outsized for that location. This is where they are now.
Right.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Just all kinds of space. See that? So here's where they were. That's 1025, right? The landscaper ones that we've been to. That's when IPSI was there. There's dumpsters right on the lawn. A trailer, 20-foot roll off back here, trucks and stuff all over the place. And that's their new building.
And now all their cars have decals.
This is
Same decals, they're really sure.
This is 3,200 square feet. 32,000 square feet. There's 2 buildings, one behind that.
Wow.
And they've got all kinds of parking out of any setback. So I really congratulate the way the guy grew his business. But yet, in my view, that is non-conforming. So we got to do something. Okay. Anybody else have anything else? I will send that out.
The only thing I want to write the state DOT and try to figure out why the off ramp to 390 and now only has 1 lane instead of 2.
Oh,
Kind of like make your own. Could be 2,
Ex-
could be 1.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's actually why they changed it. I still don't.
The off ramp going from 390
From
up,
390 southbound to 15,
it's only 1 lane.
1 lane.
It's probably
One-
all So all the daffodils were planted out.
Yes, there must be that.
But the stoplight still has two signals.
Yes, yes. It's not a stop.
Traffic control.
Oh, I say that in tongue in cheek because I
Yes.
designed them for 20 years.
Understood. The correct terminology.
Sorry. But yeah, no, so things like that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not planning board stuff.
But just sit there and wonder how.
Somebody thought it was better, right? It was an improvement.
Yeah, somebody. Anyway, no, I have nothing else that,
No, we get a packet like you did before with a bigger blow up of the site plan segment
Or an informal.
for the next one, yeah. Because
Probably not. This is,
No,
well, this isn't,
Formal.
this is informal review, so we tell them,
Well, this is a photo.
They
Yeah,
can
that's what
do an accurate sketch is
Yeah.
one of their choices, and that is what he chose to send in.
this is all we're gonna get. This,
okay,
You want these back?
Yes.
Valerie does want the blue folders back. Mac, you all set? Nothing else? Carol, you good?
Yep.
John, Paul,
Okay.
I'm set. Okay, thank you for your help tonight, and, I make a motion that we adjourn. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.